On Sunday, President-elect Trump made Stephen Bannon his chief strategist and senior counselor. The Bannon hire instantly drew criticism from hate watch groups who have noted Bannon's embrace of the alt-right movement made up of conservatives, populists, white supremacists, and anti-Semites. The Southern Poverty Law Center saying Trump should rescind this hire. The Anti-Defamation League voicing its opposition to Bannon because, quote, he and his alt-right are so hostile to the core American values, and House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi saying there must be no sugarcoating the reality that a white nationalist has been named chief strategist for the Trump administration. And joining us for more on the appointment of Steve Bannon is Susan Nyland, a board member with the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida, Christian Ziegler, a state committee man for the Republican Party of Florida. You work with the ACLU, right?
I do, but I'm not really here tonight for the ACLU because
then we want to make that clear.
Yeah.
Christian, I know you could not give a hoot what Nancy Pelosi says.
No, I mean, this is obviously expected.
But when it comes to issues involving racism, white supremacy, the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center is they pretty much are the most credible organizations in the United States talking about those issues, and they flat out consider
those are liberal organizations. For years, they defended liberals and they promoted liberals.
Defamation League.
But when you look at Steve Bannon, you start talking about his comments, and they call him anti-Semite and stuff. I mean, let's not forget, like, he headed up Breitbart. Breitbart was actually Jewish himself, right? Andrew Breitbart. The first 7 hires to Breitbart News were actually Jewish. They have plenty of Jewish people that work for them that are actually big-time contributors that work under Steve Bannon, Steve Bannon has hired. So this is just an effort by the liberals. I'll tell you, they lost a big election last week, and they need to turn the corner, and they need to redirect blame, and they need to change the subject. And that's what you're seeing with Nancy Pelosi and all the Democrats doing right now.
Christian, I got to tell you, you cannot stay with that argument. First of all, civil liberties are not a liberal issue. They're an American issue. So everything that they're talking about right now has nothing to do with they're liberal or not. If you are anti-Semite, it's not like the liberals are only sensitive to that issue.
But where's the proof? Where's the proof that he's anti-Semite? Specifically, what is the proof?
His words that he uses, what he refers to people as on tape, on radio interviews, on television interviews, it's all there. Things that he's written. On top of it, things that he's allowed to go on in his own publication.
Glenn Beck is no liberal. Mm-hmm. In fact, he's probably one of the most popular broadcasters.
But he's an anti-Trump guy. He's been an anti-Trump guy for a long time.
To many people watching this broadcast tonight, to Republicans who live on the Suncoast, he is wildly popular. He said, when people come to understand that the alt-right, this neo-nationalist, neo-Nazi, white supremacy idea that Bannon is pushing hard, I hope they wake up, because if not, we are racist.
Yeah, but look at this. Okay, so Glenn Beck has been attacking Donald Trump for countless number of months
now. But he's not a liberal.
But he's not a liberal, but he's an anti-Trump guy. So you have the liberals, you have the never-Trumpers that are going after Trump because they're sore losers. Look, Donald Trump, he won the electoral vote. If you look at the votes, he's won over 300 votes. And it's a shame that everyone's trying to tear up, Steve Bannon and try to focus on this when the real issue should be Donald Trump won, time to move forward, and it's time to make this country great again. That's what we're going to do.
Steve, I got to say, Bannon has always been a controversial figure long before he teamed up with Donald Trump. So it's not because it's a reaction from the election itself. It's a reaction that if this is a man who's supposed to unify the country, and what does he do? Not only does he pick a man that's so polarizing, even actually more polarizing than Donald Trump himself.
Yep. Before we go any further, let's tell folks why we are talking about Stephen Bannon.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Because he's registered to vote here. Yeah. How did that happen?
He is, and he doesn't live here either.
Well, no, he was registered to vote here. He's registered in New York now. But the way it works, I've actually been in a similar situation. When you are a political guy that goes up D.C. and you work, you don't usually switch your address directly up there because you're there temporarily. So you have to find a place to register to vote. You buy property. You keep all your stuff somewhere. I don't know about his specific connections to Sarasota. I know he was registered in Miami, then he was registered here, then he was registered in New York, where he's actually been spending a lot of time. So I read an article today. He voted in New York, which is where he's been spending the last couple months anyway. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's an issue you probably have to talk to Steve about.
But it's kind of ironic since it was the Trump campaign that talked about election irregularities and voting
Well,
and
there's
whether it's all
nothing,
legit.
but there's nothing illegal about what he's done. I mean, I think people have looked at it, and if there was anything illegal, obviously they would have gone after him. I mean, you have obviously Barack Obama, the head of the government, with his, Department of Justice, and they would have stepped in if there was something illegal. There's nothing illegal. People are just talking about, well, what's the coincidence that his voter registration in Sarasota? Again, nothing illegal, everything by the book. And if there was a problem, obviously it would have been exposed by now.
Last word, Susan.
Well, I just think it's kind of ironic that the same people who were screaming about election rigging and all these misgivings about the election don't mention it at all right now.
That's not apples to apples, because that's,
Well,
we're having issues with people
but that was a
illegally
part of
voting.
it.
He's not illegally voting.
No, you're correct. But he did leave a
Why don't we
question.
take a pause right now? Our discussion of Steve Bannon and Trump's appointment is just getting started, but when we return, we'll bring you a check on the evening forecast. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it has been a week since the election, and we're already learning some of President-elect Donald Trump's picks for the top jobs. One of those picks is raising some controversy. Steve Bannon joining us for more on the new White House. Chief strategist is media specialist Susan Nylund, who serves as CEO of Nylund and Associates, and Christian Ziegler, state committee man for the Republican Party of Florida. I want to talk about other issues with the transition, but let's stay on Steve Bannon for a little bit, because I don't remember this kind of controversy about an appointment to a new administration that does not have to be confirmed by the Senate. Do either one of you recall anything like this?
I actually do.
Okay.
In the beginning, in 2009, with, and now I'm drawing a blank for his name, he was head of the green energy, and he's now on CNN. Oh gosh, I can't believe I forgot his name.
Van Jones.
Van Jones.
Yep.
If you remember, there was a lot of controversy over him because of something he did when he was 20. But that doesn't compare to what we're talking about here with Bannon, and I think that makes a big difference. However, the difference was Van Jones stepped down right away because he didn't want to be a blight on the administration. I don't see Steve Bannon doing that.
Alan, Steve Bannon has been on Team Trump for like 6 months now.
Yeah.
And now the issue's coming up. So I think what people actually have to do.
It wasn't just coming up
Well,
now.
no, but now
the
they're
questions
really
were raised
focused
later.
on it. But they're now really, their questions were raised.
Because he was has an appointment.
Well, but questions were raised about Steve Bannon at the time. And then the American public actually came out and voted knowing that Steve Bannon was on Donald Trump's team, and Donald Trump won. So I think the real question is right now is, why is this coming up? And I'll tell you why it's coming up. Is you have liberals, you have people that oppose Donald Trump on both sides that are sore losers. And now after the election, what they're doing is they're coming out. Let me just finish.
Okay.
They're coming out, and what they're going to do is, this is a typical tactic of the left, is when they lose at the ballot box, they try to rip people down. And now they're focused on attacking Steve Bannon as an individual to really change the narrative from Democrats totally failed and lost this election that everyone thought they were going to win.
But let me just ask you this, and again, it's not just Democrats or liberals who are raising this issue.
But it's people that oppose Trump.
Here's the question. Breitbart,
Yeah.
alt-right, accusations that it gives credence to white supremacy. Mayo Yiannopoulos, I can't pronounce his name, but you've probably seen him on TV. He wrote in March that the alt-right uses anti-Semitic imagery, but only to shock older generations. I mean, you've heard these allegations before about the alt-right and Breitbart.
Well, they also accuse the alt-right of being against homosexuals, and actually Milo is a homosexual.
Yeah.
And so I think that people are picking words and taking them out of context to fit a narrative that the media is trying to generate after this election to tear Steve Bannon down once he's in. So I think that's what we're seeing, and they're having success because they're dominating the headlines. But I think what we need to be talking about is the fact that Americans knew about this before they voted for Donald Trump. They selected Donald Trump. Steve Bannon was on Donald Trump's team, and now it's time to move forward and piece this country together.
You need to not just lump Americans into selecting Donald Trump or the team or anything else, because it's not true. He won by the Electoral College. He didn't win by the majority vote. So there's a lot of people out there that are very angry right now. And that being said, like I said a little earlier, if this is supposed to be a move to unify, why would you pick such a polarizing individual, let alone give him equal power to the chief of staff?
Two things. Number one, the Electoral College, that's how you elect a president. No one talks about the Carolina Panthers winning 15 games last season and having the best record because the Denver Broncos actually won the Super Bowl.
But the Electoral College doesn't knock on your door saying, we're
But the
really
Electoral
unhappy with
College,
you.
he won overwhelmingly. I mean, 306 votes now from the Electoral College that he actually had. He is the president, and it's not about unifying the country right now. I mean, that's part of it, but it's also about putting people in place to fix this country and fix the problems.
Right.
And Steve Bannon has taken the lead against corruption.
But he doesn't have the
and
skill to do it.
Susan,
So.
well, I mean, whether he has the skill or not, that would be on Donald Trump. The question, Susan, is shouldn't any president be allowed to pick the people that they choose to advise
absolutely.
and counsel?
And we've never denied him that, but that doesn't mean he's beyond reproach with his choices. It doesn't mean that he isn't up for scrutiny over his choices. And, there was a lot to question. And I get the Electoral College, and that's fine. But those aren't the people who are going to be knocking on the door and expecting service. And when you put someone in who's just like him, what message does that send to the rest of the world?
Okay, enough of Steve Bannon. Let's talk about the rest of the transition. There are already some bumps in the road. Chris Christie has been shoved aside a little bit. Mike Pence is now in charge of the transition, the incoming vice president. Is it unusual for transitions in terms of when the new administration is coming in from the other party to have this kind of bump in the road? Because both parties had transition teams in anticipation of winning.
Sure.
So they've been at this for months.
Well, yeah, but when you look at this, I mean, you have Mike Pence, who's a proven guy in Washington. He knows how Washington works. He's been there. He has a lot of relationships on the Hill. Obviously, he was busy campaigning before the election. I'm not too shocked that the pre-election transition team has now shifted to a post-election transition team. And I think that's what we've seen. And I think no one better on the Trump team than Mike Pence to head up that effort. So I'm actually excited about it.
Susan?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the issue is Chris Christie has a lot of other problems that he needs to deal with in his home state. And so he was not the candidate anyway. The fact that he was actually the leader of the transition team to begin with was a little surprising. But it's not unusual. I've seen it before that they always go through a little bit of working things through.
Let's talk about some other names. Rudy Giuliani, possible Secretary of State. Good pick?
Yeah, I'd love to see him at Justice Department, too, as Attorney General. But I think whatever Rudy does, I mean, America loves him, and I think the world would respect him.
They also threw John Bolton's name in there as well for Secretary of State, and I was pretty surprised about that, too.
Well, John Bolton, and I don't know if he's been eliminated from that position, but he's known as a neoconservative who does not exactly have the same kind of outlook on foreign policy as Donald Trump does. So, figure that out for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see if he ends up getting picked. But I think Bolton is, what he and Trump have in common is they're a very America First kind of individual, that they're going to be focused on America's interests. Let's
say it's Rudy Giuliani, Susan. What kind of foreign policy does that mean for the United States?
I have absolutely no idea, because I don't know what he stands for as far as foreign policy. I mean, he's always identified with New York, and he doesn't really go beyond that. So I've got no clue.
Trump's still going to lead. I mean, his leadership and his views on foreign policy, that's what's going to drive this discussion. And, again, it's about having a strong America and preventing us getting in all these wars around the world by having a strong and respected military and a strong and respected country.
Is there an issue inside the transition of those members of the Republican establishment who might be ideal candidates for some of these positions but did not support his presidential campaign? And possibly turning to people who have been with him all along. How do you look at that?
That'll be an interesting dynamic, because obviously Trump ran against the establishment and ran against Washington, and there's a lot of people in Washington that maybe he's going to need their help. But I mean, you look, he brought the chairman of the RNC over, Chairman Priebus, who is very connected to a lot of the establishment players in Washington. So I think Trump's kind of opened up his mind, and he's been willing to kind of reach out and put a hand across to the establishment and bring in a couple of them. But at the end of the day, Trump's coming in, and I heard that he's going to split time between Washington and New York and Florida, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because it's good to get out of that beltway.
I don't think he's bringing the establishment in. I think he's always been a part of the establishment. He's been well known for spending time and writing checks and calling on them. So this anti-establishment movement was very short-minded, because not only did he bring in a lot of the establishment, they sent the establishment back to their seats to begin with.
One interesting dynamic, going back to Steve Bannon for a moment, is, Reince Priebus, incoming chief of staff, very close friends with Paul Ryan. Steve Bannon, not so much. I mean, Breitbart has done a pretty good job over the last couple of months in basically making Paul Ryan into almost being one of the enemies.
Well, I think Steve Bannon spent his career going after the establishment and going after
So how
beltway
does
politics.
he deal with Congress?
But I think when you look at that, well, I mean, you have Mike Pence as vice president. I think Pence is hopefully going to lead the effort towards Congress. But even with Bannon, I know he's been reaching out the past 2 days. He's been calling down to all the congressmen and starting to develop that rapport. But, you know, kudos to Donald Trump for bringing two different individuals with two different ideologies to the table so he can expand his view.
Susan, you get the last word.
I think it's going to be a very interesting watch, at least over the next year, to see what happens. I'm not as optimistic as Christian is. I think there's going to be a lot of problems between both Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus because they rule differently, and because they have equal power, it's going to be a problem.
All right, we have to take a break, but when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests. Plus, we'll hear from some of our viewers saying about a food safety issue in Sarasota at an elementary school yesterday. Welcome back. Over the next 2 months, we'll be learning more about who will fill Donald Trump's White House administration coming in January. Our guests join us now for final thoughts on some of the early selections. And, you know, you've already promised to send the clip of tonight's show to Steve Bannon, so thanks a lot for that. Susan, is this just a controversy that's going to last a couple of days, or is this, do you believe, going to carry on for a while?
You know, I believe it's going to be fed by the people that are in the center of the controversy. I think that he's a very controversial individual, and he's always welcomed controversy. So I think his actions are going to keep it going. I don't think they're going to survive. I think one of the two are going to end up being gone, and most likely it's him.
What do you mean one of the two?
Well, between him and Reince, it's unusual that a chief of staff has equal power to the, what is it, political strategist or whatever.
Worked pretty well in the Reagan administration.
Correct. So that's unusual. We're talking about two people that are accustomed to having power on top of helping another man who's accustomed to having power. So I think Bannon will probably just leave out of frustration, not because of a controversy.
Christian, whether you think it's fair or not, this is being discussed around the country, not just on television or in the newspapers, but you see stories of people saying, you know, linking Bannon and Breitbart to whether it's anti-Semitism, white supremacy, or anti-gay issues. This is not good for a new administration.
Look, Alan, again, this is something, Bannon's been on Team Trump for 6 months, and they brought it up a little bit and didn't have much traction because they were in the middle of a campaign.
Right.
Now they have a huge loss, and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats have to save face, so what they're doing is they're pivoting, and they're trying to pull this up and make this the topic of conversation. I think that we have a lot of sore losers, so liberals are pretty upset, and the Democratic Party should be reflecting on where their failures were instead of trying to tear someone down and change the discussion. I'm an elector, and I will tell you, my inbox is full of emails from liberals telling me to change my electoral vote, which is actually against the law in Florida, to vote for Hillary Clinton. That's not happening. But again, sore losers. This is what we're dealing with.
Susan,
They're desperate. They are
desperate. That's right. They're desperate.
But they're desperate out of fear of the changes that are going to come, and that's the concern. It's not. It's no longer about, oh yeah, we lost, because they're not talking about Hillary anymore. They're talking about preventing what is going to happen.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. I want to thank both of you. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about a story that we told you about last night. Florida's Department of Health is investigating an incident at the Gosio Elementary School after mold was found in some breakfast items being served to students. Sarasota County serves 30,000 meals every day, and cafeteria staff follow procedures by throwing out the rest of the shipment and warning other schools. But here is what some of you are saying about the incident. Nicholas White writes, "Both my kids came home this same day vomiting from the same school. Makes complete sense now. How disgusting." Kimberly Herbeck writes, "This is not about making your kids lunch or not. This is about the fact that the school is serving spoiled food. Sarasota County is one of the richest, most expensive places to live in Florida, but it's okay to serve spoiled food to children." And Susan Smith writes, "If only parents would actually learn how to feed their own children wine, wine, wine." Susan, really? Really? If you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news7. And FYI, want to watch past Roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thank you for our guests for being here tonight. Susan Nylon is a media specialist and CEO of Nylon Associates. And Christian Ziegler is a state committee man with the Republican Party of Florida.